Hey guys, Infidel 1258 here. Back again today to do another video talking about a proposal here that's about to go through. Looks like it's going to go through within the hour, and we're well past the pass point. It's the alternative solutions to addressing bot farms in the wild format. And there's a 2000 DEC, they call it a permit to play within the wild, that's wrapped up in this proposal. I want to read it because I've seen you guys ask about this. I've seen comments and concerns about this, and I have some opinions. Plus I want to get into, since it looks like it's going to go through, let's talk about what I predict the efficacy of this will be. So if that sounds interesting, stick around and stay tuned. If you're new to my channel, my name is Dwayne Cunningham. I go by Infidel 1258, and I do cover Splinterlands regularly. It's been a while since I've been regular, but we're aiming for daily videos, and they come out at midnight Pacific Standard Time. So yeah, if you're interested, subscribe, drop comments, because I review them regularly and turn them into content too. And so thank you guys for your support. Let's get into it. So this here proposal, I opened it up already, and it's coming from the big man himself. Yabapmatt dropped this one, and there's a lot in here, and I don't want to read the whole thing, and maybe you already know about the ins and outs of this, so I'm not going to beat you to death with details, but there's some key things that I want to, I guess, summarize and speak to set the stage, knowing that not everybody will have touched this yet. This is what is called the SPS Governance Proposal, Alternate Solution to Address Bot Farms in the Wild in the Modern Formats. And I think it's more about discrepancies across like player base within those two leagues. Matt makes the point that it continues to be a problem, like bot farms continue to be a problem, and the opportunity to earn without significant investment is a pathway for that to persist. So if there was a way for it to be more complicated, less easy for bots to come in and earn within the wild format, then maybe they would be discouraged. There would be less bot farms. And we're going to get into numbers. He talks about how many thousands of accounts are playing in wild. And then you compare that to modern, you go, obviously that's people running bot farms. And so with all the data backing up, I think his claim is I think I want to accept it on the face of it. There are more people playing in wild, and those are bot farms. They are playing there because it's easier. That's the foundation of the conversation. And then if that's so, how do we, first of all, is that a problem? And then secondly, if it's a problem, how do we correct for it or discourage it? His argument is that that is a problem, and it's an exploitation. He uses that word here, exploiting the value by these bot farms. And I think that's probably accurate. Now, that's a whole conversation in and of itself. And I want to kind of, that's my foundational starting point. I believe it is long-term, not optimal. I might see there is nuance in that conversation, but I'm going to say that phrase, that it's not optimal that we have it, that we're set up in that way. And so I do agree, as most of you, that it would be optimal if we could discourage bot farms from just being extracting, and encourage more real players who want to play a game and play and earn. And I think that's what stuff like this is aiming at. The question is, does it actually attain that goal? So we'll get there, but that I needed to say all that to set the stage with respect to what's being discussed here. One of the main points within this proposal, I think there's three main points that I want to touch on. The first is that he is responding to or trying to redirect our concerns around this issue of bot farms extraction. And he's saying that there has been a community initiative, a recently passed proposal, which relies upon measuring collection power in order to essentially deter bot farms from having the success that they have. And Matt makes the point within this proposal, and we're not going to read most of it, but I'll say this one thing about that. It's extremely complicated and cost heavy to use that as the metric or the measuring stick or the barrier to exclude or deter bots. Meaning, if the team has to constantly check your collection power, your account's collection power, and thousands of collection accounts before thousands and thousands of battles to make sure that you meet certain criteria before you're paid to earn on those battles that you might win, that's a hugely cost prohibitive way of deterring bots. You know that when you buy a card, it's your card, it stays in your account, and that's easy to measure. But how many times do you rent cards that just after 48 hours disappear off your account? and they're all rented at different intervals because I'm transacting that I'm processing that transaction at different moments. And you can imagine that. So at 8:59 a.m., 10 cards are rented. 30 minutes later, 10 more cards are rented. 30 minutes later, 10 more cards are rented. And so those contracts will end 48 hours thereafter. And so my collection power is going up in these stages of increment, and then it's coming down also. And in order to really track that, the game would need to constantly search my collection power. That's cost prohibitive. That's challenging from a bandwidth perspective. That requires more cost outlays because it's more transactions that are being transacted through, I think it's Amazon. And so all of that is an expense. And that's why he really is pushing against that community-led proposal, which he's referring to here. And he's trying to deter us from focusing on collection power and saying, what about this? The alternative is SPS stake. This is the second piece. I said the first piece, there's three pieces I want to talk about. The first is that collection power doesn't really work, according to Matt, and I think he's right. I didn't really say that yet, but I think that makes a lot of sense, right? That sounds cost prohibitive. I don't want the team putting a bunch of money towards Amazon to get extra servers to track that stuff, etc., because that's a cost, and we want the game to be sustainable. We want the team to be, financially thriving, etc., for our best interest, right? So that's topic number one within this conversation. The CP doesn't seem to be the logical approach or the best approach or the optimal approach to explore, I guess, discouraging bots from really farming in wild. That's point number one. Point number two is SPS stake might be better. And he goes, he says a lot of things around that, but he's making the point that I think, we know Matt believes, which is that SPS stake is the core to what it means to be involved in Splinterlands. The more you have, the more involved you are, the more rewards you ought to get. That's from a 30,000 foot. That's the summary of what the team's view around SPS is. And of course, he's saying, so if we just say we want, if there's too many people playing in, quote unquote, too many people or too many accounts playing in wild, in this case, we're talking about bot farms, but even if it was just too many human players playing and you want more balance across leagues, one of the ways to impact that would be to impose a tariff, a tax, that essentially makes it more difficult to play in wild and less difficult to play in modern. And that's a bit of what he's saying. He's like, if that's the goal, we want to make it more challenging to play in wild because so many accounts are playing there. Why are they playing there? Because there's significant rewards, and there's less, oversight around the bot stuff. And therefore, people are flocking there in tens of thousands of accounts. The problem being many of those are bots and they're just extracting. And so all of that said, one of the easiest implementations is to double down on what we already have, which is SPS stake being the metric by which we measure your investment, your commitment, your ability to receive rewards from this game. So if we just say you need to double that SPS in the wild format to maintain the same amount, that might sound shocking to people who enjoy the wild. My account plays in the wild and I do use a bot primarily. And so you go, well, man, that's going to hurt what I'm earning. That's one conversation that probably needs to happen for each of us. We need to weigh that, but you also need to recognize that he's right about the fact that SPS should be that sort of barrier. It doesn't really make sense to go back to collection power. Especially when we already have this tool, SPS, that can be this foundational basis for analyzing and sort of separating accounts which are deeply invested versus not. And I know there's ways to gimmick SPS too. You can rent SPS, etc. So, that's not exactly a silver bullet either, but he does even allude to the fact that this doesn't have to be the sole way we approach it. It can be but it makes sense to be the first way that we kind of push against the wild bot farms. And I think he's right. I think SPS makes sense because it's our token. It makes sense because that's already been a way that we measure who's more deeply invested in the game. And finally, he makes a great point down here somewhere saying that, collection power is a reflection of card ownership, technically, but you can rent, remember. And SPS is a reflection of long-term investment in the economy. And the idea that we would want to prioritize card ownership over the token ownership is actually seemingly backwards. Because if we incentivize SPS ownership, meaning you need to have double stake to play in the account in the league that most people want to play in. He says, I think it's 70,000 accounts are playing in wild. and 3,000 accounts are playing in modern. So you see that difference. It's like 20x. No, it's 25x number of players in, or at least number of accounts in wild versus modern. And if that's the case, there's this gigantic discrepancy between where people are playing. And if we want to level that out because we want to sort of maximize earning potential across accounts or leagues, then it makes sense to approach it from the basis of the SPS token, because again, driving SPS token ownership or encouraging SPS token ownership is a fundamental consideration around the SPS token price. And that should mean that SPS token price has more reason to be held, bought, acquired, staked. All of that should mean SPS token price appreciates. And that should mean that card ownership is incentivized. Do you see that connection? It's like foundationally, if the token has utility and value and there's reason to hold SPS, then you get to a place where, okay, then I need to own cards, because owning cards allows me to unlock SPS through victories within the game. So he's saying, let's put the horse before the cart, not the cart before the horse. And if we incentivize collection power, we're putting the cart before the horse, meaning we're saying you need to own lots of cards or have access to lots of cards through rentals, etc. But the real core thing is like the SPS is the thing. So let's focus there. And I think he's right. So that's points 1 and 2 about this proposal. And the third, and maybe the most important point, is around kind of unpacking the logic of why it would make sense to implement something like a 2000 DEC permit, they call it. I'm going to pull up the quote here. See, this is the final talking point I want to really bring out of this one. And I know this is a hot topic, and I want to pull up some comments pertaining to this too, as we unpack this third and final piece. Because Matt is saying, as part of this proposal, for those of you who are thinking that simply doubling the SPS stake requirements will not be enough to resolve the issue of bot farms, I agree, which is why I propose that players be required to purchase a wild season permit in order to be able to play in the wild format at all and every rank per season. I propose that the permit will cost 2,000 DEC or DCB or 40 voucher tokens, all burned, and will be required to be purchased for each account before they can participate in the wild format. And then he makes the point that like people will have knee-jerk reactions about this and say, look, I don't want to pay any more money. Like this game is supposed to be play and earn, and I'm supposed to earn something for my time and attention. I'm supposed to receive value for the commitment I've already made over the last months or years. And you keep chipping away at that. I know that there'll be people who say that and who are thinking that. And in some sense, you're right, but also you need to stop for a moment at least and just look at all of the consequences of something like this, because it's not just a 2,000 sort of DEC penalty for those who would want to remain in the wild. Recognize that this would translate to a reduction in a player base in wild. And what would that mean for you if you play in the wild? It would mean a bigger piece of the pie of the rewards that are available in the wild. Listen to this. A significant reduction in the number of accounts playing in the wild format will cause the SPS rewards for those that remain in the wild to increase dramatically, helping to offset the new permit cost. Let that sink in, because I think it's right. Now you might argue, well, that's fine and good. Sounds good, but I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know to what extent will that offset. Will that increase my reward? Like, will the reward be so much greater as a result of these changes that the permit is worth its cost? And you might have your doubts about that. And that's fair, but let's look at some of the numbers. There are currently around 75,000 unique accounts that battle in the wild every season, with about 30,000 of them playing more than 50 battles during a season. 50 battles is pretty minor. It's like 5 battles a day for 10 days. That's pretty casual. And I would argue that those clearly are not botted accounts. Those are the people who are actually playing, I would think. And maybe it's people with multi-accounts. Maybe it's human beings who have, 3 accounts and they're playing 5 battles per day or 10 battles per day, 5 days a week on those accounts. But that doesn't sound like, those are not bot farms, for instance. 30,000 of them at least are not bot farms, because why would they be playing, Why wouldn't they be playing the fullness of what they're allowed, which is 24 battles a day times 7 days a week, right? So there's at least 30,000 accounts that are playing in wild that are either humans or that are played by humans. And that's interesting. That's an interesting piece of information, first and foremost. That's a substantial amount of players, especially when you go down in the next sentence, you see that there's 3,000 unique accounts that play in the modern format, with about 2,000 of them playing more than 50 battles a season. So again, huge discrepancy. Even if we take this number, 75,000 unique accounts is interesting, but this is like more indicative of like humanity. Now, again, you can have 3 accounts, 5 accounts, 10 accounts as a human and play them yourself. But I do think this piece of data where it's like they are not playing, you know, some amount of these accounts are okay. You know what? I'm going to say 20, based on my further analysis of this sentence, 30,000 of these 75,000 are playing more than 50 battles, which is to say that 45,000 of these 75,000 are playing less than that, I think. Oh, maybe the data is not that clear, actually, is it? There's 75,000 unique accounts in battle in wild format. 30,000 were playing more than 50 battles. Yes. Which is to say that the other 45,000 are playing less than 50 battles. So the data is even better than I was just implying. It's the bigger sum of these. 45,000 of these unique accounts are playing less than 50 battles. That's interesting, because that tells us something about the number of human run accounts, because bots play every battle energy they have. And I say, why is that important? An important piece to focus on. Look at it this way. If there's that much sort of human attention being poured towards wild, and if incentives are being sort of corrected in a way that some of that gets pushed to modern, it means 2 great things for the game. One, which has already been made, the point been made by Matt, it dramatically increases the reward potential from a wild play, because it will theoretically reduce the, well, I think necessarily we have to agree that a 2000 SDC permit will decrease the number of players in wild. And if that's true, then you have to understand that the SPS per battle, per win, per account still remaining in wild goes up. That's one good benefit to those who are present in wild. You still have to ask the question if it's going to be, if the 2000 DEC permit is going to be worth it, even after the change, in terms of how much more increased SPS you're going to get. That is to be determined. But I think necessarily it's true, you will get more SPS per win in wild if this goes, and it's going to go through. It's like I said, I showed you earlier, this is passing, and it's going to go through in 53 minutes. And so that's one benefit, and it needs to be more fully explored, because you want to know, is the change in SPS reward gonna cover my DEC cost or not? That's an interesting conversation we'll need to have in a few weeks. But the second piece about what's positive about something like this is recognizing that if there's that many unique accounts that are being operated by human players, and that's indicated based on they're not playing the fullness of their battles available, and bots always play all their battles available, that should mean that there's probably thousands of accounts that move over in the modern. And that's going to mean something very interesting from a perspective of the playability in modern. One of the concerns around the lack of match liquidity within modern has provoked concerns around the team having to sort of populate with bots that are not earning. And that's interesting, and that's a thoughtful way, but that's a certain cost and a setup, etc., for the team. It would be better if human population was just incentivized to move to modern. And the more people that are, I've said this before and I'll say it again, the more people that are in modern at various levels of modern, the more easy it will be to sort of have success and joy in playing in modern. If out of the 2,000 accounts that are 3,000 accounts that are playing there and 2,000 are playing more than 50 battles a season in the modern league, most of those are going to be, I would wager, at least 200 of those, which is like 10%. Are going to be those that are just upper echelon, the best of the best. And if that means, I'm telling you, 10% of the game, the accounts playing are those sort of creme de la creme. That means us average players, and I can put myself in the average category, are going to get smacked around by some of those people. And that's a place of frustration. It's a place of discouragement that can offset some of the joy. And remember, one of my keys to why Splinterlands is special is because it's fun and rewarding. If you get these amazing rewards in modern, which can be possible, 25 SPS per win, etc., 5 SPS, 10 SPS per win instead of 2 or 3 or 1 in wild. That's great and exciting. That means the rewarding piece is there, but that cannot be enough. Or at least optimally, it's better if the second prong is present, meaning it's fun as well. And I think that element of entertainment is lost when we get so few accounts playing that we end up running into the creme de la creme, always getting smacked around by them. And then you just like win one, lose one, win one, lose one, or like lose one, lose one, lose one. Like you get on these nasty streaks because there's really talented players there. And so I think there's two benefits that come out of something like this. And yeah, there probably are some significant challenges or unintended consequences that come from a proposal like this, but here we are and it is passing. And so I want to talk about the bright side of it. And in a couple of weeks, I want to look at it again and see what the negative side might be. But I go, the two big things I see that are going to be beneficial out of an implementation, 3 big things that I see that are going to be beneficial. The SPS approach toward checking bot farm operation in wild is logical. It's coherent with the vision and the thesis that SPS is reflective of commitment to the game, and we want to incentivize ownership of it. We're going to build utility into SPS, so that makes sense. This approach makes sense. Then out of this permit piece and the 2,000 DEC cost, I see a discouragement to bot farms in wild, which is an encouragement to human players in wild, because if you continue to play in there and you pay that penalty, you're going to see increased SPS rewards. Again, will those outweigh your DEC cost? I don't know yet. We'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. And then finally, there's this other piece about making modern more enjoyable. Do you see that? It's not just about the financial side in wild. That's interesting, but it's also about the joy and the opportunity in modern. And so I think this is a well-balanced and well thought out. And finally, just one last note, I kind of skimmed on it. The idea that those costs are going to be burnt is great. These will all be burnt. The DEC or the DSP or the vouchers that are being poured into those permits will be burned. To me, make this as an amazing and logical and well thought out proposal. And I'm glad it's passing. Again, we need to look back in a couple weeks or maybe a month and see what happens to the wild format as a result of this. Because every time we move the needle in terms of how the economy works or how the game is operated, you have to then sit back and see what happens with that before you can kind of make a final opinion on whether that was successful or not. It seems like a logical one. And I know I said I drop on some comments on this before we go any further. Before we finish the video, I saw a beast of a comment. I can't read this all, Scott, but I need to give Scott a shout out here because he comes at the 2000 DEC and he's critical. And so I want to point to, I know you guys are out there and you think 2000 DEC is too much. Again, you're chipping away at the rewards that are possible for me in this. The game becomes less and less rewarding and therefore less and less interesting. That you're pushing away players through that process. People who were here and spent a lot of money on getting their accounts ready. It's this frustration in all of that. And I want to point towards Scott's comment here and just say, I read it, bud. And I know that people are frustrated by the costs and it makes them really down on the project. And the only thing I can say about something like that is that we kind of need to see, like the proposal passed. I didn't even vote on it. Actually, I didn't know about it until this conversation started, until I started coming back to the content yesterday. I heard about it, but I didn't know about the proposal. And so here we go. And I'm learning about it. I'm like, well, it's passed with or without us. And the game is what it is. And we got to keep watching how things move. And always, 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 and I've said this lots of times too, it's this constant reassessment of do I still believe that this game is fun and has a future? And changes like this can be quite dramatic, and maybe that alters some of our perspective around whether it's fun or whether it has a future. And that is a thoughtful place to stand. Like, it's an important place to honestly reflect on what we believe about the future and the probability of success for a game like Splinterlands. To me, as I posted in this video, which is from yesterday, I'm back, FAQ with 12, I talked about how I'm still more bullish than maybe ever because of my confidence in sort of what's happening in the broader crypto space, plus the game still to me continues to be fun and rewarding. So I appreciate Scott dropping this comment. I see some concerns, there's the large bot farms being run by team members. I heard about that. And I don't think they shared who that was, but I heard about that somewhere. It was in the town hall or whatever. So there is reasons to be concerned. This is not everything is perfect and we're going to be just fine and you're wrong to have concerns. As always, I think it's really valuable to be critical, but it's also important to be thoughtful about sort of all of the possibilities, not just the criticism side, not just the FOMO or the hopium side, but to try and bring them together. And I think I do that. And if you think I do that, then maybe you'll want to subscribe or drop a like on the comment or on the video. And I think I'll leave it there. But guys, let me know on the proposal and what you think about this one. I'm pretty convinced that this is going to lead to some interesting consequences around distribution and disparity across the two leagues, modern versus wild. And I think there will be positive ramifications to both leagues as a result of this, and to DEC incidentally, and to SPS incidentally, because of the increased SPS requirements, because of the burning DEC requirements, because of the distribution of accounts. Maybe there'll be a consolidation of bots. I don't know all the ramifications and the unintended consequences, but I think it is a solid proposal. And I think we do need to continue to push that conversation forward around how are we incentivizing human participation and maybe discouraging bot participation. And that seems to be this seems to be a logical step in that conversation. So thanks guys. I hope you're having an amazing day. God bless.